turnout. I'm pleased to be here. You know, it's interesting. You try to compress 86 years of background in Grand Lake. My grandparents bought, is this on? Can you hear me all right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, good. My grandparents bought the original house in 1915. So my first, if you would give me a slide there. That's me. That's up on Trail Ridge when it was still a dirt road in 1938. And that's my mother, obviously. Give me the next slide there, will you? That's my mom and dad. And if you recognize the building, you know, I'm probably messing up your video, aren't I?
No, you're fine.
Okay. If you recognize the building, it's where the fly fishing store is now. We had it as a furniture store, and then it was a restaurant for a while, Patty's. And then, I've forgotten what his name is, but it was a wonderful chicken restaurant. All right, listen, what I'd like to do, since you don't know me, at least I don't recognize any of you, so I'm just sure you don't recognize me. I thought maybe I'd tell you a little bit about my background. Does that sound good? Born in Sidney, Nebraska, came up here. My grandfather was burdened with asthma, so to get out of the western Nebraska dust, they bought the place up here and spent the summers. And at the time, the original town of Grand Lake was significantly different than it is now because it was still functioning at that point. Give me the next. This is the original cabin that my grandparents had. An interesting story to me is that they bought this cabin sight unseen, right? $900 they paid for it. And so they moved up here, for the summer, and they couldn't, they had a key to get in the cabin, but the cabin they went to, it just wasn't working. They broke the window, they went in and got all settled in, and pretty soon the Brooks family showed up and wondered why my grandparents were in their cabin. The Brooks family, the daughter of the Brooks family was Billy Bauer. Now, I don't know if any of you ever heard her name. She was quite a character up here, a wonderful horse lady. And but they became wonderful friends. And Billy said, "No, your cabin is the one up on the hill." So they go up, and of course the door was falling off. It had pack rats. I mean, it was just, no wonder it was $900. It was a dump, you know. So anyway, they stayed with Billy until that was, they had it all cleaned up and the door was back on. And so this was what it looked like. Give me the next one. Okay, this is another view of the same cabin, and give me the next one. And in 1999, I built this one. All right. It sits right above the tennis courts on top of the hill, if you're not familiar with where it's at. Let's go ahead. In those days, it was a very close community, and this is just an assemblage of the neighbors up there. To your extreme right is the lady that owned the Whispering Pines. Are any of you familiar with Whispering Pines? Okay. That was the Stevensons. That was my grandmother right next to her. That's my mom and my uncle and my youngest, or her sister, my mother's sister, in the front there, and you don't care about the rest of them right now. So anyway, give me the next one. And this is my grandmother and my youngest aunt, just outside the cabin.
That's Grand Lake in the background.
Okay.
Wow.
Now, that's my grandfather on the right, and a gentleman called Harry Shunk. Now, Harry Shunk was quite a character up here and owned the original Navajo Lodge, which now is a carpet store or some such thing up there on the corner where the fish for a dollar kind of place was. All right. He and his wife Ava were wonderful friends of my grandparents, and I can give you the next one. That's because that's Ava on the left there, and my grandmother put her on the right. I'm not sure who the lady in the middle is. All right, and unfortunately, I do not know who this lady is. This is to show you the cabin, which now belongs to Susan and Chuck.
Go for it.
Go for it, thank you. I don't suppose any of you have any trouble forgetting names, do you? or why you went in the other room.
No.
In fact, I'm not sure why I'm here. But this cabin, well, the original cabin was owned by Tom Hurst. I'll give you the next. This is Tom here. That was where he sat almost all day long, chopped a little wood. Our cabin would be behind him up on the hill, and that's our original outhouse there to the back. And there's an interesting story about Tom Hurst, and in a little while we're going to get down. I'll show you a picture of the Cordingleys. The Cordingleys and the Hurst live essentially side by side on 2nd Street. Oh, this one right here, this is Mrs. Gimmel in the middle there with, and Mr. Gimmel with my grandmother.
Can I interrupt just 1 second?
Sure.
I think there are some people here who don't even know where Main Street is in our town.
Who what?
Who don't even know where Main Street.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because
Oh,
would you just tell us how you drive?
I
Main
leapt
Street,
ahead,
where you
didn't I?
Find some of these places?
are you, the original town of Grand Lake, how many don't know where that's at? Anybody?
Well, we didn't
Oh.
die.
Well, if you go down Jericho Road, the first turn to your left is the old original town of Grand Lake. All right, that's Main Street. It runs for like essentially 3 blocks. First, second, and third. First Street is where the tennis court is right there, and that's where our house is. Second, and then third, and the taxes go up proportionally as you. Anyway, this is Mrs. Gimmel. The Gimmels were from New York, and she has the house at the end of Main Street, right on the lake, and there's a little, just a little summer kind of a shade place out there. I don't know if I'd call it a gazebo or not, but essentially it's a gazebo. Anyway, she was a very nice lady. You can't really tell it from here, but I used to go down as a little boy, and she'd treat me with cookies and regale me with stories, and she was just an awfully nice woman. Her hair, she put it up in an elaborate braid system, and when she took it down, I only saw her one time. It hung well below her rear end. It was quite the thing to witness. All right. Now what we're looking at here, oh, that's Mrs. Gimmel's house now. Give me the next one too. All right, we're going to back up. This is the tennis courts there in the back. Now when I was a boy, there was actually a small store. It was kind of like a 7-Eleven if you consider horses pulling in. They had just the basic stuff. There was actually a grocery store in town, but they would supply with milk and bread and that kind of stuff. You can see the old pump that they used to get their water. They had a little livery stable in the back, and they had some kids that I would play with. All right, give me the next one. This is the Spider House. You're probably all familiar with the Spider House. That was owned and lived in by Judge Gregg, and he was quite a character. He always was in bib overalls, cowboy hat, made his living, I think, because he was the justice of the peace. He was the only law really up here. And he would gather the boys, not every night, but frequently in the evening. He would gather the boys or kids or anybody who wanted to come, and he'd tell us all old stories about, his old Grand Lake. And then about, just before dusk, he'd say, "Well, boys, it's time for dinner." He had an old 44-40 Winchester, and he would go down on the footbridge. And if you give me the next one, I'll show you what it was like. This is my grandfather and my youngest aunt. That's the bridge going across the old Colorado River, where it is now. He'd go down on that bridge, he'd wait till the fish came by, and he'd shoot, stun the fish, go down and get. Of course, if anyone else in the county had done that, they'd gone to jail. But that was his thing. As an evolution of the bridge, just to this was the next iteration, when they straightened it out, and it was still the Colorado River at that time. All right, and the next one, this is when they actually, when they were building Shadow Mountain, they lowered the lake, and they built this new bridge. And if you look at the widest part there, I would imagine from the water level to when it was normally full, would be about this high above the water at that time. And we used to go down to the islands, clear at the south end of Shadow Mountain Lake, and water ski. And the deal was the last guy to water ski would water ski from all the way up Shadow Mountain, right through the channel, duck and go under that thing at full speed, and back over to the city dock. All right, now the next one. And this is, of course, the way it is now. All right, it's quite an improvement and a lot safer. All right, go back to the families. This is, there we go. This is Whispering Pines. It's not a very good view of it, but this is, it was kind of a gathering place. And Mrs. Stevenson is the lady, seated there in front. That's my mother with a white collar. Most of these people, it really doesn't matter who they are to you. Actually, I don't really remember the names of most of them. So that's why it doesn't matter to you. Give me the next one. This is Whispering Pines now, and it's owned by the Downing family, and the Downings live, Sally and David live next door. David is the son of the Downing oldest daughter. All right, give me the next one. This house here is the Billy Bauer house, and the one that my grandparents moved into. Somehow they thought they bought that for $900. And we're up the hill to the left. The two in the wagon that on the left is Billy Bauer, that is Mrs. Bauer's son, and my Aunt Betty. He was killed in World War II. All right. And this is the Cordingleys and the Cordingley girls. Now, the interesting story about the Cordingleys and Tom Hurst, because they're on the same street, they had apparently been partners at one time, and when they were partners, they bought these lots next to each other. You know, they thought that would be nice. Then they had a falling out. So if you look, if you go up there and ever want to take a look, the Cordingley's is built on the extreme south end of their lot, and Hearst is built on the property line at the extreme north end of his lot. So they're like maybe 30 feet further apart, you know, but that was the deal. And if you can just flick through these next ones, they're just pictures of activity at that time. This dock is down by what used to be the Mitchell House. It's where Ted and Sue James lived for many years. It's been recently sold, and I don't know who the new owners are. But it sits right on the lake. And Mrs. Mitchell owned all of the cabins around behind her, and she rented those out. She was from Topeka. So I just, it's my mother on the right. I don't know the lady or the girl on the left. Oh, okay. That's my grandmother. I don't know how they stood that water. In fact, get-togethers were very common in those days, and this is Billy Bauer right here. She was a terrific horsewoman. How many of you ever have taken the East Inlet Trail and gone up over the big rock cut up there? Any of you done that?
Yeah.
No? Well, if you go up, way up, there's a really steep rock face, and they cut a trail right through it, but it's kind of cut out and then flat, and it's not very wide. She had a horse called Joker, and she was going to ride that horse across that cut. And she was telling me about it when you got back. She said she got about halfway across on the horse, and the horse decided he wasn't going any further. And he turned around and went back. And she said as the horse went around like this, she was looking straight down about 500 feet. Every time I think about that, I get kind of a chill. All right. This was out at Squeaky Bob Wheeler's. This is later years. This is Billy Bauer in the center, my Aunt Betty at the side, and this was a lady that worked for my grandparents. Okay. And more just typical. Okay. This is up at Grand Lake Lodge. And the man clear on the right is Harry Shunk that I told you about before, and the taller lady next to my grandfather is his wife Ava. I'm telling you this because, unfortunately, I don't have a picture of it, but the original Navajo Lodge, being up there or by the little fish pond, when Harry passed away, she remarried a man named Jim Robinson, and they built the new Navajo Lodge down where the condos are now on Shadow Mountain Lake, you know where?
Shadow Mountain Yacht Club,
Okay.
behind the Conoco.
Jim Robinson was his name. He was quite a craftsman. They had, you think the Spider House is elaborate with its little woodwork. He was an amazing craftsman. He took all kinds of weird limbs and stuff, made them into really neat stuff. But anyway, that's the and this would have been probably early 20s. All right. And these are this is a path from, would be the Colorado River, the Point Park now, just along the lake. And in the, up until I was like, hell, I don't know, 50, no, or over that, maybe 20, that path existed along the lake, and you could walk along, actually you could walk all the way around the lake. And if you were, like in the evening, my grandfather and I liked to walk into town, and the rule was if there was a porch light on, you were welcome to come in and visit, okay? But people enjoyed having, you know, walkers come along and, okay, next one. Okay, here's the, down, you know, the city beach. The yacht houses are in the back there, well before they put the piers in. This is the original Pinecone Inn downtown. It burned down. I don't recall exactly when it burned down, but it burned down, and then it was rebuilt and owned by a man named Don Negri. If you give me the next picture. Okay, here's the Circle Bar where the restaurant is now. What is it called? Poncho's? Oh yeah, Charlie's. But the whole building extended down, and there was a really nice dance hall. All right, and then on the end there was a dining room, and the dance hall. All through the late 30s, 40s, even during the war, the big bands would come into Denver and play down at Elitch's in the Trocadero Ballroom, and then they'd take time off and they'd come up, and so you could frequently catch, you know, Duke Ellington or Tommy Dorsey, or, you know. My grandfather loved to dance, so we would go in, and it was 10 cents a dance. Anyway, this is where there was a stable. This is right at the end of Main Street, the new Main Street, downtown. And there was a friend of mine actually built a putt-putt in here for years. It existed. But the Grusing stable was here. There were two stables in town. This is where we kept our horses when it was a stable, not now. Okay.
Was it the Brewers that built Boot Hill Golf Course? Putt-putt golf course?
There was a putt-putt, but there was no brewery.
I thought was,
The family name Brewer?
Oh, no, Doug Killen built it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the building right next to it, there. All right, this is this is where the old corner cupboard was. And this one, I'm sorry these aren't better pictures, but
Not an inn.
oh, that's
your furniture store.
that's my old furniture store, yeah. I guess I ought to be able to recognize that. That kind of got out of sequence on me. All right, give me the next one here.
Let's see, hold on.
Is that it? No?
Yeah, that's it. Number 38.
Well, I thought I had, well, I apologize. My son and I threw this together yesterday, and apparently we didn't do as good a job as we thought we had.
Oh, it's great.
But let me tell you, I can kind of give you a little brief overview of how we doing on time. I don't want to bore you to tears, but if you were to go down from where that putt-putt was and go west along that side, the south side or north side of the street, there was Howie's Pancake House, Hap Howie's, which later became McDonald's.
And that's where our office is.
Yeah.
Mountain Lake Properties.
Then, originally when I was a little boy, there was actually a shooting range, 22 shooting range. Downtown looked more like a carnival than a downtown, if you really want to know the truth. There was all kinds of things like shooting games you could do. Then, next to that was Jeff Snyder's pharmacy. And next to that was, of course, the Horseshoe, is it?
The Lariat.
Lariat.
Yeah.
Thank you. Lariat. Then there was Bill's Cafe, which was the only place around you could get Chinese food. And on the corner where the sagebrush is was Zick's Grocery. And then further down, and I wish we could show it, but yesterday I just for fun, I drove down, I took a video of both sides of the street. And I got to reminiscing about it. If you go down where the outdoor store is now, the main part of that store was the post office. Next to that was a Swedish pancake house.
We're talking about Never Summer.
Never Summer.
Yeah.
The Swedish pancake house was right next to that with their lingonberry pancakes. Then next to that was the, it's kind of like a house. I think they sell jewelry in there now.
Mind Design.
That was the telephone office. And then a little later in the 50s, next to that, as you go on west, was at that time the Foghorn 3-2 bar.
And that's White Buffalo.
Yeah. And the couple that owned that, their name was Jack and Dorothy, and I have been trying to remember their last name.
Lockhart.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Boy, it's great to have a memory. Anyway, that was a very popular place. It was, we had a lot of fun in there. The other side of the street, if you were to go the next building west of Charlie's was Bachman's gift shop, and Isabel Bachman was who owned that, and her husband had Bachman Electric. He was the local electrician. She was actually a native of Grand Lake, and I can't remember her maiden name, I'm sorry, but she was kind of our Grand Lake lifeline during World War II. My father was stationed on Catalina Island, and she informed us about the progress of the building of Shadow Mountain and all of that. And I got to tell you, when I came back, I left the one summer, the whole valley looked just like Kawanichi Valley up there. You know, there was a few houses, gorgeous. I came back the next year, it was all gone, and I was sick. I hated that lake for years and years until I found out how to fish it. Anyway, then of course, Mrs. Humphrey, who's remarried Mr. Bunny, okay, and Bunny owned the other stables, which were where they built the new apartment complex with the
Bowling alley.
where the bowling alley was.
Yeah.
There was a stable which was later then owned by Rocky Garber. And Garber's an interesting story. He had a young kid live with him who had musical aspirations and tried to make a go here in Grand Lake, but nobody would hire him because he had such a terrible voice. Somehow he made it work though. His name was Chris Christopherson. He lived with Rocky and Barb. And interestingly enough, in later years, probably 20 years ago, I'm guessing, he and Rita Coolidge were doing a show in Denver, and they invited Barb and Rocky to come up. They gave him a suite, took him to all the doings. He went up a notch in my opinion at that point. Rocky was a real cowboy. His first job was a brand inspector, and he rode the backcountry all over this part of the area, clear to Kremling, and he just spent the whole summer out on horseback. He was the real deal. And he was the first manager of the Winding River Ranch when it was privately owned.
And that was a Bunty stable?
Bunty, yeah.
Okay.
And so, Matilda Humphrey was actually Bunty, but she always went by Humphrey. Or at least in my memory, she did. I remember my granddad and I went down and got ice cream sundae. No, I'm sorry, ice cream float. And it was 25 cents, and I was stunned because in Sydney, Nebraska, you could buy them for 15 cents. You know? I said, man, that's really expensive. He said, well, Bob, everything's high in the mountains. What are you gonna do? Anyway, that pretty well wraps up an overview, because, I mean, I could go on for a long, long time. You would be so tired of me.
What joke?
But I thought maybe just as a wrap-up, I would tell you a little bit about myself, okay? Like I said earlier, born in Sydney, Nebraska. I spent all my summers up here. I was able to pull that off because my aunts and uncles would come up for 2 or 3 weeks, and if I played my cards right, I could come up with my grandparents, stay with my parents, stay with my aunt, stay with my uncles, and so on. So I usually spent almost all my summer. We had horses up here, and I don't think there's a trail anywhere around here I haven't been on. Anyway, after I graduated from the University of Northern Colorado, I picked up a little hobby that I had started on Catalina when my dad was stationed out there, skin diving, and started scuba diving, which as a hobby. Got deeply involved in it. To make a long story short, I wrote several books on scuba diving, educational books. The programs that I wrote now are the #1 programs worldwide. I sold the programs to Head Sports in like 2008, and they're now translated into like 63 languages. Okay. Anyway, that's how we got the new house. Now, I made a list of just a lot of characters up here. How are we doing on time?
You're good.
Maybe some of you have questions. Why don't we try that? Anybody have a question about any?
I've got one. During the 50s, was there a raft flight off the beach area in the lake here?
And not in the 50s. In the 50s, it was really a gathering place. You know, the 3 primary employers of like college kids were the David Haven, the Piper family out of the people that made Cushman motor scooters from Lincoln, Nebraska. The Lodge, of course, which is where my wife Marilyn worked. And what was the other one? And of course, there were still all the dude ranches, out in the Calvinici Valley. So all the kids, when they had, they had the time off, they just gathered on the docks down there, and it was quite a party place. It was a lot of fun. But I don't recall any. There was one later, but I can't tell you when. I don't remember.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody?
On old maps, there is what I think was a trapper's trail that went very aggressively up the side of Shadow Mountain, and it went into Echo Creek drainage, which is to the left of Mount Bryant. Did you ever know about that trail?
No, I don't know.
From Jericho Road.
The trail, the only trail I've ever been on back there was the one that the Rangers always used to go up to the fire lookout.
Okay, yeah. Did you ever scuba dive in Grand Lake?
I tried to avoid that.
Yeah.
Actually, isn't Grand Lake, but that was my profession. And I didn't want to mix my recreation and my profession. How about old characters? Anybody you've heard of, like Doc Lee? Anybody know that name ring any bells to anybody? Doc Lee was the town marshal and the maintenance supervisor, the road maintainer, and he was the entire department. And there were several of us. Rocky Garber, his brother, it would be John Henry Roan, Doc Lee. We hunted and fished together a lot over on the Troublesome. He was quite a character. A local friend of mine, a young man at that time, Ward Nair Construction, he had a 28, I think it was a Chevrolet sedan with no floorboards. And, just to tell you what kind of law enforcement they had, one day we were drinking beer, driving up and down Main Street, and Ward says, I'm just going to back down. He backed down the whole length of Main Street, and we were dropping beer cans, empty ones, down through the floorboard. And Doc Lee, we turn around, and there's Doc going So we stopped, and he says, boys, he said, that just makes an awful mess for me to clean up. He says, I'd appreciate it if you just stop that. That's it. But the next summer, they hired an ex-Chicago cop, and he was a huge guy, and his name was Marshall, and everybody called him Marshall. Okay. And he had a really bad limp that he'd been shot in the leg, but boy did he enforce the law. And if guys got out of line, he'd come after them, and he just kept coming. He didn't chase them, he just kept coming. And you could just watch the fear build in these guys, because they knew they were in trouble. And if he got up to them, he carried a billy club, and he just whacked them. Hauled them off to jail. The Roan family was very big up here. They,
Ron's, yeah. Aaron, most recently to us,
Yeah.
who lost his twin son, or twin brother, who was very,
Ah.
I know Aaron Brown very well.
Well, John Henry was my friend. I didn't know any of his relation or offspring other than his mother. But they built the corn cupboard. They were quite a fixture up here.
We knew Aaron most recently. So.
I was on the town board with Aaron for probably 12, 15 years. So I knew Aaron pretty well. I met some of his relatives, and I was also friends with the Heckarts. Louis was the mayor when I was born.
Yeah, Louis owned the cleaners.
Yeah.
Hello, dancer.
And so were there, yeah.
Great
Tap
dancer. He and his wife.
And I became mayor eventually, and that was one of the things that I had looked at my past, is like, these guys were like good people
You could always depend on Louis to get his microphone out, right up and down the street with his loudspeaker.
Oh, yeah. And I was able to drive Black Beauty with Louis in my side thing, so yeah, I did that with Louis.
Another great guy up here was Matt Rusk. Anybody? Matt Rusk and Chris, his son.
Neighbors
The
of ours.
Harringtons.
Huh?
Harringtons also had,
Yeah, the Harringtons, there's a nice story I can relate to you. The Harringtons lived up on the hill, just south of Main Street, okay? And during World War II, when I mean, virtually nothing for, just regular consumption was being made. The Harringtons made like bathroom fixtures, okay, that was their primary business. And my grandmother in Sydney wanted to redo a bathroom that was bad, but she could not find anything. So she called Mrs. Harrington, and they rummaged through their showroom and found this lavender set of, a stool and a sink and a tub. And she got that from my grandmother. I tell you, that was the highlight of my grandmother's life. Anyone who came into her house went immediately to the bathroom.
How about Grace and Leo Martin that own the filling station? They own the standing station.
I didn't really know them. Most of my needs, I guess, in that area was with the Conoco station up on the hill that was owned by Dean Clark. He
Yeah.
built that up there.
And the old guy that owned Sunshine Cabins there, do you remember what his name was?
I'm sorry.
The old guy that owned Sunshine Cabins over there, where the new condos are.
I don't.
He was there for many years when I was a little kid. But Grace, Leo and my grandfather and Monsignor Barry, they fished up here. That was their little group of fishing buddies.
Well, there's just a lot of folks. I worked for Clyde Eslick, doing odd jobs at one time. There was it's just so many really good, fun people up here. The Spitzmillers, Gus and Gordon Spitzmiller.
Do you know the history of Jim Kay on the east end of the lake, where the old hunting lodge was back in the 20s? Well, I helped frame those turrets.
Oh, uh-huh.
I helped Dave Anderson frame those turrets at that house at the east end of the lake,
Huh.
way back in the 80s, early 80s.
Was that for the present owners?
Yeah, he died
Yeah.
in South America of blood cancer, but Kay.
That's quite a house. We were in that house, and their collection of stuff that they'd found all over the country was pretty impressive.
They were amazing people,
Yeah.
and the thing she did, she retiled that whole place
Yeah.
by herself. And
Yeah.
then her husband got cancer, and I actually built the bathroom that they thought he was going to die.
I know he did all the wood flooring.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I built the bathroom. They thought he was going to die in, but then he did better again, and then he went down to South America, and then he recovered again, and then he eventually lost his life. But that's an important piece of property, because that was a hunting lodge back in the 20s that you could only access through.
Well, most of the lake you could only access by
Yeah.
boat.
Yeah, exactly.
So in the mid-90s, we came to town and we decided to join the bowling league and become part of the community and meet people and all that stuff. So we joined the thing. And our original bowling team was myself and my wife, and Jim Poole was an architect, and Grace Eslick. And she was 83 when we started bowling with her. We bowled with her for 2 or 3 years, and she was a stitch. She was a stitch. She was quite the lady. I'm very proud to know that I knew her then.
And do you still hear her
See what you got started?
Oh yeah.
All right, well, thank you very much for your attention. I hope I didn't